Welcome everyone. Today we are going to be answering the question, write a narrative account analyzing and then it will give you some form of major event that is part of the Cold War. Now this question, you might have guessed, is part of the Cold War paper. You will be given a total of 8 potential marks that you are able to gain for this question, and you are looking to do that within the timescale of 15 minutes. Generally speaking, you want to write a total of 3 paragraphs, split with 5 minutes shared between those 3 paragraphs. Now, before we can answer this question effectively, we need to understand what a narrative account is, and basically put, it's just a story. And with that knowledge, you can kind of already begin to imagine the success criteria that you need to be engaging with. Like any good story, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything makes sense. There are details. And most importantly for this question, it needs to flow in a chronological order. It cannot go beginning to the start to the middle. It needs to go from the very start to the middle to the end. Everything needs to flow and make sense. Now, when you are looking in the exam, you'll see something like this. It will give you the question. In this case, we are writing a narrative account analyzing the key events of the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. But what we need to pay attention to is this box below, where it gives you 2 stimulus points to include. Now, you need to remember that you do not have to use these. If you do not understand them or you don't have any knowledge surrounding them, you don't want to waste your time writing about these. What you need to do, however, looking at the mark scheme, is that there is no access to level 3 for answers which do not go beyond aspects prompted by the stimulus points. So what you need to do is include at least 1 extra bullet point of your own. I think a good habit to get into is just thinking about your 3 most confident areas and then just bullet pointing them 1, 2, 3 along the margin there. You do need to include your own information. Now, when we look at the mark scheme and we break it down, there are 3 key parts. You need to have a clear sequence of events leading to an outcome. Simply put, you need to provide a number of points which are logically structured, linking into that chronological order. The account of events analyzes the linkage between them and is coherent and logically structured. To ensure that you are doing this, you need to be explaining the event in the wider context of the question. And finally, accurate and relevant information is included, showing good knowledge. Simply put, once again, that is just supporting with evidence. Now on this slide, if you want to hit the pause button, you have a total of 8 possible questions. If you've watched any other videos, you will know that the one in green, I am going to be answering for you right now. And the 2 in yellow, you will find a pre-planned version in the PowerPoint slide that is uploaded with this video link. So you could then go into those and try and answer one of these 2 questions with kind of somewhat of a scaffolding created by me to make sure that you can engage in them as successfully as possible. Now, we are going to be answering this question. Write a narrative account analyzing the key events of the Hungarian Uprising, 1953 to 1956. Now, when you look at this date here, it is going back 3 years from the event itself. The Hungarian Uprising takes place in 1956. The fact that the question has been designed to go back to 1953 means that there is something in 1953 worth talking about. When you are answering these questions, you want to try and go and cover the entire date range. So I want to cover 1953 all the way up to 1956. If I just talk about 1956, it just shows the examiner that my knowledge around this area is weak, especially when I'm going to the origins of the Hungarian Uprising. Now, the structure to this question can become quite abstract, but generally speaking, you want to try and include the following things. You want to provide the point, which is going to provide a general summary of the first thing that happens in the narrative account of the event. And with this, you want to try and sprinkle in as many as the W's, the 5 W's, as you can. Who, what, where, when, why, and also how. Once I've done that, I want to talk about what happens next, but I want to provide it in some kind of evidence that will be able to summarize it effectively. Then I go on and I explain what happens next, and then in my final sentence, I try and provide the foundations for the next paragraph, so I start alluding to what's going to come next. Now, when you are writing this, there's some language that will help you be a lot more successful, that will the repetitive use of this language will more than likely gain you marks. You want to be including words such as therefore, because of this, thus, in order to, this led to, combined with, as a result, as a consequence. In addition, when you are analysing the event, to be able to actually analyse it, words like began, became, developed, realised, changed, ended, all of these words kind of work in contributing to that analysis. And before we start, just going over a few top tips. Make sure that events are placed in chronological order, date order, from start to middle to end. You want to provide as much detail, evidence as you can. If you know it, show it off. The more, the better. And you need to ensure that everything links together. The story shouldn't start and then stop. It should all flow from one point to the next. Now, before I even started answering this question, I just jotted down some key evidence. What could I remember surrounding this date range? And ultimately, I've broken this down into 6 major steps. You can pause it here if you want to have a look at the flow, but ultimately plotting this out, it just allows me to know that I've got an absolute ton of evidence that I can use, and at this point, all I'm doing is just throwing these words in between it and trying to make it flow logically. So, if we are to go to the write-up, in early 1953, with the change in leadership, the US with Dwight D. Eisenhower, 1953, and the USSR with Nikita Khrushchev, 1956, brought hopes for a reduction in tensions. This was mainly due to Khrushchev denouncing Stalinist ideals and moving towards ideals of peaceful coexistence. It seemed that a Eastern European uprising was unlikely. So in this, just to pause here, I have gone from the change in leadership, I have linked that to Khrushchev denouncing Stalinist ideals, and I have then linked that into the question. So while it doesn't look like I'm writing much, everything is linking to the next step. Now, moving on. This was shown in the Geneva Summit of 1955. However, this was not the case. Tensions intensified when West Germany joined NATO, and as a consequence of this, the USSR formed the Warsaw Pact. It was this pact that ultimately led to the final straw that caused the Soviet invasion of Hungary. So as you can see, I've annotated this here as well. If you want to have a look, the underlined words are linking language. The bits in purple are specific examples. The bits in purple are links to the focus of the question. The bit in green is the specific evidence. And yellow is just me setting the scene with some names, with some dates, and I'm making sure that I go all the way back to 1953 to show that I am aware of how things happening in 1953 contributed to the Hungarian Uprising. So moving on to the second paragraph, let's just read that last sentence to make sure it links. It was this pact that ultimately led to the final straw that caused a Soviet invasion of Hungary. However, before this took place, a number of steps had to be taken. So I am addressing the previous paragraph. I'm quickly pausing to kind of, to a degree, go back in time, so to speak. 1956 saw the Hungarian people rebel as they were unhappy with the lack of political freedom, fuel shortages, and poor harvests. Eventually, this discontent led to rebellion, with the public clashing with the police and eventually Soviet troops being required to regain control. This led to Imre Nagy's appointment as leader of Hungary, which was a key step in the Hungarian Uprising. So once again, continuing to set the scene with the 5 Ws, giving specific evidence, and also making sure at least once I use that linking language, as well as generally linking it to the wider narrative at play here, the Hungarian Uprising. To finish off, the appointment of Nagy combined with the discontent of the people resulted in a number of changes. He reorganized the Hungarian government, authorized the release of political prisoners, and even convinced Khrushchev to remove Soviet troops from Hungary. At first, Khrushchev allowed these changes, still linking into that narrative though. However, when he announced that Hungary would be leaving the Warsaw Pact, relations between Nagy and Khrushchev soured. Therefore, Khrushchev invaded with 1,000 Soviet tanks and Nagy was captured and killed, being replaced with Janos Kadar. Thus, the Soviet Union regained control despite Hungary's attempted uprising. So as you can see throughout this narrative account, if you just look at the colours in the slide quickly, I am doing everything I can to be linking things back with the purple, making sure that I have some evidence with the green, and ultimately going to a large amount of effort to keep within that storytelling mindset, both with the yellow providing the 5 Ws, but also if you look for the underlined language, constantly providing links. So hopefully this has been helpful with you better understanding how to answer that narrative account questions. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comment section below. Thank you.